Dino, it's a pleasure to have you one more time. We didn't talk for 2 years and 2, 3 months. How's everything going on with you after COVID hiatus? You've been relatively active recently, and you've been traveling a lot.
Yes. Well, first I should say Eid Mubarak
Yes,
to the Arab and Muslim world, since it is the beginning of the most important, I think, Eid al-Fitr, right? And we're very conscious of this, both those of us working in Jordan, but also working in the heritage of the Near East, including Greece, which had and still has some Islamic Muslims and Islamic monuments. So Eid Mubarak, and I'm very happy to introduce you to our activities over the last 22 years now.
Nice. You're talking about projects that you run in the region, not only in Jordan, because you've been active in Oman. Please, go ahead.
Okay, if you want, I can speak about this. We began really in the year 2000. We began a group of Greeks that were interested in the Near East, the Middle East. We began an organization called the Society for Near East Studies. First, we called it Middle East Studies, and then after a while, we thought Near East is a better word because it includes non-Arab countries, it includes Ottoman Turkey, it includes Afghanistan, it includes North Africa. So we originally were people that were interested in politics, in cultural studies, archaeology, religion. If you see our website, we're really interested in everything to do with the Near East, and as a base in Greece. Even though it's not exclusively for working in Greece, it's basically working in Near Eastern countries, East Mediterranean. So we began primarily in Jordan, has been most of our work, archaeological work. We worked in Syria, the Sultanate of Oman. And very recently, we've been started during the COVID period, we started a project which is to do with Ottoman and Islamic monuments in Greece, but specifically in one town, which was a prosperous town in the medieval period. So it was the town of Halkis, ancient Halkis, or medieval Negroponte, or as the Ottomans called it, Egribos. And there are reasons for this change of names. But this is now also where our society is based. And what we've really done is we're not looking at modern political borders. We're looking at the area of East Mediterranean, beginning from modern Greece, Turkey, Anatolia, the Levant, Bilad al-Sham, and Egypt, of course. We haven't done very much in Central Asia, let's say Afghanistan, but there is one Greek here that is has a project in northern Iraq, in Kurdistan. But primarily we were working on the coastal areas of the East Mediterranean during medieval, but also prehistoric times.
So you're covering a very wide range of periods and topics.
Well, yes, it's basically what the members are interested in. Now, I have been leading it for the last 20 years, so it's a little bit of my leadership, but there's been other people that are working on, for instance, museums. Some people were interested in the Bronze Age and other periods, but it depends on what the members are interested in. Yes, my focus has been mostly in the Bilad al-Sham, the Levant area, which is Jordan and Syria. But as I said, we have worked a little bit in the Gulf. And we're currently doing our new project, which is now for 2 years, is in Greece, but it's during the Ottoman period. So you can say it's Turkish, it's Ottoman, and it's also Islamic, but it's within the modern country of Greece, which again makes my point that borders disappear when you look at history and culture.
I'm interested to know what kind of research you're conducting in Oman and how you find the Gulf for archaeologists, because recently they established a branch of Louvre and Guggenheim museums in the UAE, and it seems that they're investing more into archaeology and cultural heritage.
Yes, you open a very big topic up, Saib. It's a topic which, yes, you rightly say that the Gulf states have opened up in terms of museums and in terms of looking at possible tourism, but it's also half. It's also whether it's American or the French Louvre or the British museums, they are looking for funds, and it's been a way to subsidize these institutions, also universities, which are based in places like Qatar, American, European universities. So there has been a number of European, Western American universities and museums which have set up branches in the Gulf states. And as I said, I think this is like, I don't know if it's 50-50, but it's, yes, there's an interest for bringing people to the Gulf states, but also it's a way of using expertise from some of the world's best museums like the Louvre and opening up branches in the Gulf states. So, which also brings us to the other point, it's a matter of funding and money. You know, what I said initially about our Society for Near East Studies here in Greece, it was initially set up, let's be frank, was to help for funding, because we're a non-profit organization.
Yeah.
We issue receipts, and we haven't been terribly successful in a lot of fundraising, but it's potentially there, and that was one of our reasons to get funding. We've had funding from the British Museum, from the British Academy. We've had funding from the USAID. We've had various funding, the Greek governments, even the Omani and Jordanian governments, Syrian in the past. But yeah, so focusing on the Gulf states, yes, there's a financial thing, and there's also tourism is a business. So they want to attract people coming to their Gulf states, which will, I suppose, make some money. Now, our General Secretary of our society is actually a museum specialist. Perhaps you can invite him to speak. He speaks very good English and French and Spanish and Arabic. And he teaches museum studies. He's of the younger generation.
I think I met him in Oman.
I think you did, George Papaioannou.
I met George Papaioannou with you.
He was in the Gulf. He was in Qatar for years at the University UCL, University College London, but he specializes very much in museum. And I would suggest that he would speak to you, focusing more on museums and why museums are in the Gulf and this whole story. But it's a big issue because it's a way of, as I just said, bringing in funding for these European Western museums or specialists, paying for them to go, and also transferring, of course, knowledge to the local museums in terms of. Now, the only thing else I'm going to say about things that are related to museums, for the moment at least, is that I visited several times Qatar and some other Gulf states, particularly Oman, where we had an excavation. It's very interesting, but it's not as rich culturally, archaeologically, as the Bilad al-Sham, as Levant. So we go there and we excavate, for instance, and they put things on display, and they're really only a handful of objects. Whereas you excavate in a place like Jordan or Syria, it is very, very rich archaeologically. It was a very important economic area for thousands of years. It's not a coincidence that we've had great civilizations from Mesopotamia and the Nile River Delta. You know, this is much richer than the Gulf states, which are literally richer today because of oil, petrol, but they lack in, without being too condescending or rude. They lack in a lot of culture that the Bilad al-Sham Levant has.
I mean, they were the backwater of the Arab world before the discovery of oil. We don't have to be politically correct, but this is the historical fact. On the other hand, they also have their heritage and sites, merchant posts.
Well, there are some, yes, there
they
are
had
some.
Merchant posts
I mean, they're certainly, they were traders, particularly the Omanis. The Omanis were not such a backwater. They just had a different viewpoint. The Omanis were trading with East Africa and India.
Yes.
So, and the Oman is actually quite rich in iron, in copper ore. And from Bronze Age, from thousands of years ago, people from Harappa, from the Indus Valley civilization, were coming to take copper ore and then take it back to to India, to the Indus Valley, and make their copper items. Also, they had a lot of trade with the south of Arabia, there's the frankincense, and East Africa, which also has trade, particularly human trafficking. So the Omanis at a very early stage, well before the British and the Americans, were dealing in slaves, and that's a commodity.
Yeah, that was the first slave trade before transatlantic slave trade that Brits established.
And they were shipbuilders, they were seafaring people looking towards the Indian Ocean and Africa, Madagascar, and places that were so Oman is very different from the other Gulf states because it also doesn't have a huge amount of oil wealth today, but it does have more of a history and culture than some of the other Gulf states, which they had a big pearl diving industry. The pearl industry was important. There's even operas written about the pearl divers, even though it's kind of romantic, European. I think it was Bizet that wrote this opera about pearl divers in the Gulf. But it's a wealth. But the populations were also very small in Arabia before, I guess before 50 or 80 years ago. So there were less people there. Now, with oil wealth, there's cities that have been built on the basis of oil.
What are activities of your society, the Hellenic Society for the Near East? You're normally, of course, by the default, you are focused on the Near East. And do you have, by the way, I never asked you this, do you have any support from Greek decision makers and stakeholders?
Unfortunately, we don't have consistent support, and in fact, we're project based. So when we have a project, we have done fundraising. So we have had some substantial support. For instance, in Syria, over 10 years ago, before the war, we had 3 projects which were funded by the Hellenic aid, the Greek kind of version of the US aid, not as much money. Yeah. But this now is defunct, but it was part of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And we set up in Hama, we set up a very successful conservation laboratory, an exhibition on Hellenistic Syria. And we had a mosaic documentation program, which we still have the database for. So that was originally funded by the Greek government, but that's kind of stopped. We've had other things, but they're project-based. Right now, probably the biggest project that I'm taking on with our society is to organize, run, and manage the International Conference on the History and Archaeology of Jordan, which is going to be held in Greece. And we're about to have an MOU, signing an MOU agreement with Prince Hassan's Interfaith Institute and the Department of Antiquities. And we will basically be running the organization of this conference. And that's quite a substantial issue, because the budget will have to be, let's say, a couple 100,000 of any currency, and it will involve, over 100 people. So at the University of Athens in 2025. So that will be or is our biggest project to date. But again, the funding is not coming from the society. We have to fundraise on the basis of this project.
Regarding Oman, you said you're working on that project. Since when you began the new project in Oman?
Sultanate of Oman.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, it's a little bit of I don't want to say sore issue, maybe just a heartbreak, because I first went there. We first started there. I worked there in 1988, and I fell in love with the country. 1988. It's a long time ago, and I fell in love with the country. It's beautiful, and the people are beautiful, and it's just absolutely lovely. I wanted to move there, like many people did. I had some of the best experiences of my life there. The project was sponsored then by the British Museum and the University of Paris. Years later, I revitalized it in the 2004 or 5 with our society, did some small fundraising. The Ministry of Tourism and Culture supported us, of Oman. And the site is very interesting, but we haven't been able to continue because of, well, lack of funding and also time, but primarily lack of funding. The site is called Ras Al Had. It's the farthest eastern tip of Arabia, of all Arabia. It sticks out on all the maps, and it basically looks at India and the Indian Ocean. And that's the place where we found in the Bronze Age, thousands of years ago, and in the Islamic period, about over 1,000 years ago, we found that they were exploiting copper ore. They were exporting it. So during the Bronze Age and in the Islamic period, copper ore was really important. In fact, they were calling it was called in text the land of Megan. But that project, we worked on it up until 15 years ago or so. We set up a small exhibition museum, but it's kind of been frozen. Sadly, I would love to go back. Perhaps we will. My projects in Jordan are running, I don't want to say to an end, but they're concluding for the moment. And if I could, I would go back to Oman. But as always, funding is an issue.
You mentioned Jordanian projects. Are you going to finalize the sugar factory in Ghor Safi?
Well, essentially, what's called Tawain Sukkah, or I prefer saying Masna al Sukkah, the factory, the sugar factory. Yes. Essentially, since 2018, it's finished. We excavated the double kind of pressing rooms with their gear shafts. We excavated 8 boiling areas where they boiled the crushed sugar juice and crystallized it. So essentially, we have maybe 80% of the factory excavated and published. It needs a little bit more documentation work. What's sad, and I just came back from Jordan last week, is that people have destroyed parts of the blocks and architecture of the sugar factory, even though there's been substantial support from US aid to put up signage and put up walkways. In spite of that, locals have been smashing up, unfortunately, the building. That's a very big issue in the area where people are not just poor. There are poorer areas in Jordan and in the Middle East, but it's a matter of identity. We tried very hard to explain to them the identity of this factory with their own culture and heritage. But I think the quest for gold, particularly, is insatiable and very difficult to prevent. So the sugar factory we have studied.
Yeah. Do you think they came to the sugar factory looking for the hidden gold?
Yes. They do everywhere. They do, and not just Jordan. They do it in Greece. They do it in Italy. They do it everywhere.
In Serbia as well.
It's obsession, and you know what? They do find it sometimes too. The problem is they find one gold coin or some earrings, and they will smash up a whole site for that. It's sad because it's not really a lot of money. And what we've always been trying to tell them is that if we work there, they can make more money being employed. The problem is that we haven't worked there for 5 years. We haven't worked there for 5 years, and the people now need money. Which brings me to a new chapter of the Ghor Safi, and that's the University of Warsaw. I courted, if you will, and successfully courted the Polish archaeologists from the University of Warsaw. We came out in December, and they're literally leaving tomorrow from Jordan, and they've begun a new project, which I encourage you to discuss with them. They have new discoveries.
I'm planning
but
to do that.
They've taken over, for me at least, directing the project and fundraising, and hopefully that will help to keep people out of the illegal digging and employed. But it's not really going to start on a big scale, legal excavations until the coming winter. So they have the summer months to do some more damage, I'm afraid.
Oof, that's very bad. But this brings us to another topic. In coming days, I'm preparing the series of articles about looting and vandalism. I have my sources. Those are Jordanian scholars, international scholars, and I'm going to run 2-3 articles where I'm going to indirectly blame the DOA. I mean, DOA is responsible for sites, and they have to find more efficient way to protect, for instance, the sugar mill. I've been to sugar mill a couple of times. You put the signage, you put paths, also fences erected, but it seems that locals don't understand the need to protect the sugar mill, because those who benefit from sugar mill and basilica that you also unearthed are the locals. They're going to benefit from tourists and from monuments and historical sites if they preserve them. But if they smash signages and if they destroy sites and loot sites because of some coins, everybody's losing at the end.
This is the theory, and for years I've been saying this, but the reality is they want to feed their families, or at least they want to get some gold today.
Yeah.
So the DOA is officially responsible, just like any government is responsible. We had some very bad fires and crashes here, and ministers resigned, but it may not be their fault, and it's very difficult to solve some of these problems. The problem in Jordan is extremely delicate because it goes up to the top. And there are some people, wealthy and influential people, that are quite involved in this and don't see it a big problem. And they don't see the destruction. So you can't blame the local people. And I'm not sure, the department for sure could do more, but it's not totally their fault.
No, it's not their fault. No, I'm not going to blame the DOA. I was joking a little bit because you know very well how I'm involved with the DOA. For years, I've been covering different historical and archaeological topics, and very rarely or never they contacted me or had any kind of interaction with me as an editor. So I blame the DOA for being too bureaucratic and too idle and incapable of maintaining a fruitful and useful relations with media. They're not very media friendly, to be honest.
Well, it's not only Jordan. There's other countries have similar problems. In Greece, the antiquities laws are much stricter than Jordan. If you are found with one coin or one piece of pottery, you go to jail. In Jordan, people have tons of stuff, complete stuff in their homes, and you just register it. So, but it's too strict, because then it forces people to really go undercover or just sell them, or worse. I know what happens here in the town that I'm in, which has a lot of antiquities. the people come to build houses, and they come with the big bulldozers and they dump it into the sea. And you go to the seashore and you find all these antiquities by the beach because they didn't want to declare them. So it's not an easy problem to solve.
No, it's not, of course.
Here it's too strict. And in Jordan, for instance, we were trying to do some work on an Iron Age site in Ghor Safi, and we have to get permission from the landlord, which means the landlord can dig, and he has dug all the way down and found things, and they can't stop him that easy, if at all.
Yeah.
Whereas we have to not only get permission, we also have to pay compensation for the bloody tomatoes.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you what happened with another project in Ghor Safi, the Basilica and Baptistry that you discovered.
Well, within the Ghor Safi, which is a big area, and there are various sites, there's the central kind of city center called Khirbet Sheikh Isa. There was at some point some Sheikh Isa, and his tomb was there, but not so long ago. But I never saw it or found it. So this area is a low mound, and it's mostly occupation from the 15th century Ayyubid Mamluk, going backwards to the Abbasid period, Byzantine, and Nabatean Roman. Now, when we got down to 3 meters or so in the center of the Khirbet Sheikh Isa, we found part of a church, an entranceway, some very nice marble columns imported from Anatolia, and the remnants of a cruciform baptistry, which means they're baptizing, converting, non-Christians to Christianity in the 6th century AD, which is normal. That, because of the depth of Khirbet Sheikh Isa, we could only uncover a small area. But more recently, which is not so recent, it's 2019, on private property, a bulldozer for agriculture discovered a second church, which is now been excavated by the Department of Antiquities, and we've just finished documentation. And it's much bigger, with a long inscription, very important inscription, and various other details on the mosaic. So we have a second church, probably dedicated to the Bishop George Yorius. We have a little bit more excavations, which I am thinking and planning to complete next February. And then we'll have the plan of the church. Now, meanwhile, the Department of Antiquities has purchased this from the private landowner. So we have at least 2 churches within the Ghor Safi, Khirbet Sheikh Isa. We also have Lot's Monastery Church, which is up the mountain. There's also a small hermitage. Plus, I suspect there was a church underneath the sugar factory, because we have pieces of church architecture. So the town of Zawara on the Madaba map, which is what Ghor Safi is, was important enough to send a representative, a bishop, to the council in Nicaea, the Nicene Council every year.
Yes, the first council.
Having 4 churches and a couple of monasteries is I think quite normal. So we have more than 1 church. Plus, a little bit farther north in Ghor Mazra, there's a new church which was also found by a bulldozer, and in the Lasan Peninsula, we have not far from Ghor Mazra, there's another monastery badly destroyed. So in the area, there was substantial Christian churches and communities.
Who's going to take the torch from you after you finish your projects? You said that sugar factory was completed in 2018, and you're still working with churches that you excavated in Ghor Safi.
Well, this second church that was discovered by bulldozer, I only was thinking now I'm planning to go and just complete the plan of it. So it may just take a couple of weeks to clear the rest of it. Most of it's already cleared, but I do not plan to continue. The University of Warsaw, which seemed to have access to good funding, have taken the torch. I am not going to direct the project anymore. In fact, even the church, I was going to go just to complete it because they're interested in other things. There's very important early Bronze Age sites that are there. There's Roman, Nabatean Roman sites. There's Iron Age. They're focusing more on those periods rather than Khirbet Sheikh Isa. the Islamic town, which is unfortunate because it's quite rich, but everyone has their priorities and academic interests. So University of Warsaw, seen and hopefully, inshallah, will be taking over that. I have other ideas to do some other work in Jordan, perhaps in the north of the Dead Sea, but I can't discuss them at the moment.
Yeah, we can wait a little bit until you complete and finalize these projects. For the end of this session, I'm going to send you the link in a while. We can stop here because we have only 1 minute and 30 seconds. So
okay, I can, if you want, I can conclude that at least about the Ghor Safi project.
Yes, please.
Is that we have 3-4 well, actually we've got 7 publications that I've published. So I feel very much that we can complete the project. We've got 3, academic archaeological reports. We've got books, 3 on the inscriptions, Greek and Aramaic, and 1 popular one done by Acor. So 7, possibly another 8 books on the Ghor Safi. That's what I feel will be the end of my part of the project.
I mean, 8 books are very impressive for a site like Ghor Safi. You dedicated almost 4 years of your expertise and work in that area. I think you started in 1984.
Well, I started in Jordan in
85,
85, but
85,
I didn't
yeah.
go to Ghor Safi really until 87, 86,
Okay.
87, 88.
So it's like 36 years. I'll send you another link now.
Okay.
We will continue now with Ottoman architecture and Ottoman sites in Greece. How many of them still exist in modern day Greece?
Ottoman what, buildings?
Buildings and monuments, how well they are protected and preserved.
Yeah, this also is a delicate issue, which goes back really to, well, 200 years ago when the foundation of the Greek state. Initially, most of Greece was part of, all of Greece was part of the Ottoman period, Ottoman Empire, except for Corfu, by the way. But so it was very much Ottoman, Turkish-speaking Muslim part of the East Mediterranean. As the Greek state was formulated, they had to reinvent a Greek identity, and they chose to go back 2,500 years ago to classical Greece. And thanks to the German and French and British scholars, they helped recreate a Greek state and teach the Greeks Greek again, because it had been pretty much, I mean, it was around, there was Greek, even literature, but it was not standardized because there was no state. And then develop things like architecture, like what's called the neoclassical architecture, and all kinds of other identity issues. Even names of cities and towns were changed. So initially, 200 years ago in Greece, like a lot of the Balkans, were very much culturally Ottoman, Turkish speaking, and Muslim, even though there were substantial Christian minorities or even majorities in some places. So the buildings were traditionally made of wood, mosques made of mostly of stone, but the houses built and very beautiful wood houses with kind of a mud plaster didn't survive. There were also a series of fires, which is normal. You get fires and wood burns. In this town here that I'm speaking to you from, the town of modern Chalkida or ancient Halkis, or what was called in Turkish Egribos, there were 2 fires in the 1880s and the early 20th century, and most of the buildings, the wooden buildings, burnt. It also happened in Thessaloniki in northern Greece, and I'm sure it happened in many other places. I don't think it was necessarily intentional, but it's just, there wasn't much organization, fires catch. And now the mosques were mostly made of stone, and they did survive. Having said that, many of the mosques weren't intentionally, let's say, bulldozed, because they weren't bulldozers 150 years ago, but because the Muslim populations, the Turkish Muslim populations, left, they went to Turkey, there was an exchange of populations in the 20th century, these mosques fell into disrepair. And eventually, the buildings were used, stones were used for building material. In some cases, actually in quite a few cases, there were older churches, Byzantine churches, that were turned into mosques. In those cases, they were turned back into churches. So things like the minaret and the minbars were taken out. In Thessaloniki is some very good examples, which was a major city. By the way, Athens was a sleepy Albanian village. There was nothing there of anything. It wasn't even the first capital of Greece. Yeah. This town here, Halkis or Egribos, was relatively more important. And there are two reasons, or maybe three, that our project is based here now. First of all, it's because I own this property. It's our old family house. It used to be an Ottoman house. Now it's, our family house. And it's also now the new, for the last 10 years, it's been the headquarters of the Society for Near East Studies. And it's very well located because there is an Ottoman mosque which has survived nearby. It's, very much like a Near Eastern town. There was a Jewish community. There was a Latin community, an Orthodox community, very much like, let's say Jerusalem is, or many of the Eastern towns. Now, the other reason that we've chosen this area to work in, it's secondary, but not less important, is it was during the Ottoman period, the Islamic Ottoman period, Egribos, this town of Egribos, was the capital of the Aegean, the entire Aegean basin, and in fact, Mehmet II, the conqueror, he took Constantinople, modern Istanbul, and the next town he went for was here, Egribos, because it's a strategic place. If you look at the map, it guards. It has a very narrow strait with the bridge, and it's a very good place to make your base. It's also very good for agriculture. There was wood, forests for wood. There are rivers. It's also very close to the mainland Greece. So the Ottoman Turks, following the Venetians and the earlier Byzantines, made it the capital of the Aegean. So it was a relatively rich and wealthy, let's say, secondary city. But the big ones in the Aegean, of course, are Constantinople, Thessaloniki, and later ports of Piraeus and Volos. But this was an important strategic place. And that's what our project is working on. We're looking at pottery, we're looking at agriculture, we're looking at Islamic monuments, the mosques that have survived, and the records. Our close colleague has gone to Istanbul and read the Ottoman records, which are very detailed because they're mostly tax records. So we know the populations, we know what they did, we know how many people there were, we know what they were eating, what they were trading. It's amazing. The information of the Ottoman documents is richer than any other period because it's relatively recent. So our project is focusing on that. We've also received a grant from the Barakat Trust in London, which focuses on Islamic monuments. So in the combination with the standing monuments that have survived, photographs, we have a lot of photographs and plans from the 16th and 17th and 18th centuries, and our archaeological work, survey, and some limited excavations. We hope in the next couple of years to have a very good understanding and publish something on this project.
Thank you so much. If you want to add something, you're more than welcome. I know you're very busy, and I'm not going to keep you talking for 3 hours, although I'm sure that you can share all kinds of information with me and my viewers. We're going to follow up on your projects, and we'll keep in touch. I wish you all the best in 2023.
Okay, yeah, I'll just make one final conclusion. First of all, if you want to contact me, more details on any of these projects, I can email you information and photographs and stuff. But the other is just to bring up the issue you said at the outset of this talk, and that's the COVID period. It actually didn't affect me very much and us. We began during COVID. We've produced a lot of work. We've been working. Most of us nowadays work in libraries and are on our own with our computers. So it probably even helped myself and others to further our research.
True.
So it wasn't so dramatically negative.
I'm very glad that you didn't have a bad experience during that phase. I was also very busy, as you know very well, during COVID pandemic. I can wish we have more pandemics in the future so I can be more effective.
Well, yeah,
I'm just joking,
funny,
of course not.
But okay.
We'll keep in touch. All the best.
Please do. And Eid Mubarak again.
Eid Mubarak, exactly.